All right. Best unit not only of the day, but in a while. How you want to do this?
I don't know. But what I do know is we're about to make a crap ton of money. What's in that box?
Hold on, it's coming up.
One violent action destroyed everything Jarrod Schulz had spent decades trying to escape. To millions of fans, Jarrod looked like a man who had beaten his troubled past and transformed himself into a successful television star.
The thing for me is anytime we find a safe, a
He
locked
likes the
safe is
safes.
kind of, I
Yeah.
mean, that's like my nemesis.
But there's
I go
never
after 'em.
anything in them.
Yeah,
You know, it's really rare. It's always like a paperclip and a rubber band.
But behind the fame, chaos, and anger had been quietly building for years. Then, a shocking confrontation suddenly exposed a side of Jarrod the public was never supposed to see. Now, at 48 years old, what has Jarrod finally confirmed about the rumors? And could he have prevented his downfall? Join us as we unveil how Jarrod Schulz finally confirmed the rumors. The night everything collapsed. There's something especially tragic about a person who came painfully close to building a completely different life, only to watch it collapse in front of the entire world. That is the story of Jarrod Schulz. Jarrod had carefully managed his public persona for years, trying to keep his life under wraps, but everything shattered on the night of April 30th, 2021. Reports have it that his longtime partner, Brandy Passante, was spending time with her friends at a bar in Orange County, California. This was almost 3 years since rumors started that the couple had ended their long relationship. They were living separate lives, but that night, their paths crossed again, and there was nothing peaceful about it. That night, Jarrod walked into the same bar, and according to sources from the police, the two started talking. But what began as a conversation quickly turned into a loud and heated fight. In the heat of the incident, Brandy told Jarrod that he needed to leave the bar, but he did not listen. Instead of walking out, people who were watching the fight said he stayed and began screaming at Brandy and the group of friends she was with. According to the police report filed later, the verbal dispute turned physical when Jarrod yelled at Brandy and pushed her twice while continuing to shout at her. Someone called the police. By the time officers arrived, Jarrod had left. In the immediate aftermath, Brandy secured a restraining order. A few days later, Jarrod, through his legal representation, denied ever laying his hands on Brandy. The Orange County District Attorney's Office didn't buy it, and in May of that same year, based on Brandy's testimony and other evidence, the Orange County District Attorney's Office formally charged Jarrod Schulz with 1 count of misdemeanor domestic violence battery. A few months after the incident, while the legal process unfolded, Brandy made a powerful and suggestive statement on her Instagram account. She posted a photo of a new tattoo on her finger that read, "Free," accompanied by a caption that spoke of escaping a very difficult situation and her gratitude for a life without fear. Apparently, the incident was a public manifestation of something Brandy had dealt with privately for a long time. But the truth is, Jarrod's downfall didn't begin that night. It began long before the cameras of Storage Wars ever started rolling, and it was utterly shocking. The past fans didn't know about. In the late 1990s, Jarrod Schulz was a young man of about 20 who was caught in a cycle of making profoundly poor decisions that would set the course for the rest of his life. His troubles with the law became serious on January 27, 1997, when he was arrested by police. The charge was felony possession of methamphetamine, a dangerous and highly addictive substance. Although this wasn't his first encounter with law enforcement, this particular arrest was the beginning of a serious escalation in his criminal behavior. Since the charge could have easily damaged his future, Jarrod was initially shown a degree of leniency by the court. He was handed a sentence of just 60 days in county jail to be followed by a period of probation. The judge had basically given him a second chance after he pleaded guilty. He served his 2-month sentence, hoping to leave his past behind and start afresh. However, that precious second chance disappeared with lightning speed. Less than a week after his release from jail, Jarrod found himself in handcuffs yet again, for the same reason, but a bigger charge. This time, he was arrested for driving under the influence while also being in possession of a controlled substance. The presiding judge decided that this was no longer an isolated mistake, but a continuation of a dangerous pattern of behavior, one indicating that Jarrod had failed to learn any lessons from his prior conviction. The judge had no more patience with him, and consequently, he was sentenced to a much harsher term of 16 months in a California state prison. Now, state prison and county jail are two very different things. Jarrod now found himself incarcerated alongside hardened criminals, including murderers and violent offenders. According to a source close to his family, this harsh and unforgiving environment served as a terrifying wake-up call. It dawned on him that if he did not fundamentally change, he would become just like the men surrounding him. When Jarrod Schulz got out of prison, he appeared to have made the decision to redirect his life toward something legitimate. He built a career in resale and thrift, eventually meeting his life partner and establishing the Now and Then thrift store, which the show would later document. He acknowledged his criminal history in interviews without ever fully unpacking it, which was a reasonable choice for a man trying to define himself differently from who he had been in his early 20s. The problem is that the pattern that was established did not fully resolve itself when his life changed. But in that fragile period of his life, the universe offered him yet another chance. A chance of redemption. That chance came in the form of a woman named Brandy Passanti. Jarrod managed to secure legitimate employment as a sales manager for a carpet cleaning company in Tustin, California. It was there that he met Brandy, a new employee who was smart. But most importantly, she was willing to look past his criminal history. She saw the man who was determined to change, not the ex-convict defined by his mistakes. Brandy became his anchor, providing the stability and support he desperately needed. Their professional relationship soon blossomed into a personal one, and together, they began to build a life. Their family grew with the birth of their son, Cameron, in 2003, followed by their daughter, Peyton, in 2005. Having a family to provide for gave Jarrod an even greater motivation to stay on the straight and narrow path he had chosen. He channeled his ambition into entrepreneurship, launching his own mortgage business during the booming American housing market of the mid-2000s. For a time, the business was a great success, affording his family a comfortable and stable lifestyle. It seemed as though Jarrod had truly transformed himself into a responsible businessman and family man. However, this period of prosperity was relatively short-lived. The global financial crisis of 2008 to 2009 hit the housing market with devastating force, and Jarrod's mortgage business collapsed, leaving him financially ruined. This failure was more than just a monetary loss. It was a profound psychological blow that threatened his very identity as a reformed man. Once again, he was faced with the specter of failure. It was during this desperate time that one of his aunts suggested a peculiar business venture, attending auctions for abandoned storage lockers. It was a high-risk, high-reward world, but it offered a new direction. This seemingly random suggestion provided Jarrod with a new business idea. But more than that, it unknowingly set him on the path that would lead him to global fame and the television show Storage Wars. The show gave him celebrity status quite all right, but it didn't stop his life from crashing. The height of fame. Jarrod was 33 at the time Storage Wars premiered on December 1st, 2010. He was old enough to have a decade of distance from the prison sentence and young enough to project the energy the show needed him to have. He and Brandy stole the show from the beginning and were labeled the Young Guns. They got it because they were literally younger than most of the other bidders, and partly because they had the specific quality of people who are still figuring it out in public rather than performing competently. They had their own stores, and they knew resale. What they did not have was the auction experience of someone like Dave Hester or the encyclopedic collector knowledge of Barry Weiss. That gap was part of the show. Watching them learn while being in the middle of it, while also managing a relationship, 2 children, and a business, was what made the format work for them across 13 seasons. The show became a massive success, as millions of people were tuning in every week to see what Jarrod would find. Suddenly, people were showing up at their little thrift store in Orange, California, not even to buy anything, but just to get an autograph or a picture with the guy they'd seen on TV. Jarrod went from worrying about his bank account to being the face of a franchise. He was living the dream. He had the fame, the business was booming, and he was doing it all with his beloved partner by his side. The longer the fans saw the couple on screen, the more they wanted to know what was happening behind the cameras. A&E was more concerned with satisfying their audience. So they decided that 30 minutes of auction hunting just wasn't enough for them. They gave the couple their own spin-off show called Brandy and Jarrod, Married to the Job. The title of the show pointed to something that some fans were curious about. Everyone had just assumed for years that they were husband and wife. They lived together, they had kids, and they bickered like they had been married for 5 decades. But the truth is, they were never actually married. The spin-off show leaned into this big time. The whole plot of the series centered around Jarrod finally getting around to popping the question and the chaos of planning a wedding. Storage Wars documented the public version of Jarrod and Brandy. What it did not fully document was the private version, including when the relationship ended, and exactly what it looked like at that point. The cameras kept rolling, the audience kept watching, and season 13 arrived with a revelation that changed how everyone had been reading the previous seasons. After going through hell to get to the top, one would think that Jarrod and Brandy had finally become invincible in their business. But nothing could be farther from the truth. People who have done it would agree that running a real business while being a full-time TV star is a lot harder than it looks on screen. To keep a thrift store stocked, one has to be out at auctions almost every single day. But to film a show like Storage Wars, one also has to spend hours waiting for cameras to set up, doing interviews, and traveling from city to city. At this point, Jarrod's brain was being pulled in different directions. He wanted to be the guy in the auctions finding the deals, but he also had to be the star the show needed. Little by little, everything started to go downhill. The Long Beach store was the first to go. It had only been open for about a year before, but they had to shut it down in 2014. That was a big warning sign, but it wasn't the end. The pressure also hit their original shop in Orange County. Having a business in California meant paying ridiculously high rent, not to mention they were keeping a massive store full of inventory, which, on its own, takes a lot of staff and a lot of work. The doors to their shop closed for good by early 2016, never to be opened again. It was a huge blow to their image, since the store had been proving that they were real experts who knew how to turn a profit. Without the shop, they were just 2 people bidding on lockers with nowhere to put the stuff. Jarrod tried to keep things moving, but the loss of the store felt like the end of an era. This was the first part of their empire to collapse, but it wasn't the last. Breakup and more arrests. Remember the rumor that Jarrod and Brandy had ended their relationship years before the bar incident of 2021? It wasn't just a rumor, after all. After season 12 in 2018, Storage Wars went on an extended hiatus, and for approximately 2.5 years, the show was off the air. During that hiatus, something happened that left fans shocked. Everyone knows that the biggest draw of Storage Wars was the chemistry between Jarrod and Brandi. They were the couple that everyone identified with. Fans didn't just tune in for the auctions, they tuned in to see the young guns. So, when the year rolled around, nobody had any clue that the most famous duo in the storage world had quietly ended their relationship. The breakup was not publicized at the time, so the audience had no way of knowing. When Storage Wars returned with season 13 in 2021, the first episode featured Brandi's direct revelation. She blatantly declared that she was not with Jarrod anymore. She added that she had ended the relationship after they completed filming the 12th season. The audience was being told, in the season premiere of 2021, about something that had happened in 2018. Brandi even joked that she was the one who kept the brains of the operation. Seeing the ex-couple bid against each other was a huge shock for the fans. For over a decade, they had worked together to beat guys like Dave Hester. Now, they were each other's biggest rivals. Jarrod was still his usual self, but one could feel the tension through the screen. There were no more shared victories. If Jarrod won a locker, it meant Brandi lost out, and vice versa. It was awkward, tense, and a little sad for people who had watched them grow up on TV. Jarrod tried to play it off like it was no big deal. He leaned into his lone wolf persona, acting like he was happy to finally be calling all the shots without having to check with anyone else first. But you could tell things were different. The playful bickering had turned into sharp stabs. The young guns weren't a team anymore. They were just two people who used to know each other, fighting over a room full of old boxes. After they separated, Jarrod appeared to fall back into old habits, and that led to a series of run-ins with the law. The bar incident was the most prominent of 3 separate criminal cases Jarrod was managing simultaneously in the post-show period. The first had occurred in July 2019, when he was charged with resisting an officer following an incident in Lake Forest, California. The full details of that incident were never fully reported, and the charge remained open as the cases accumulated. The third charge arrived in late 2021, a DUI with a blood alcohol content of 0.08% or more. By the time all 3 charges had been filed and were working through the Orange County court system, Jarrod was simultaneously managing the domestic violence battery case, the resisting an officer case, and the DUI case. Court records confirmed that all 3 cases had been consolidated and were heading toward a combined jury trial. This was the beginning of the end for Jarrod's time on the show. Without the husband and wife dynamic to ground him, his aggressive bidding style started to feel different to the audience. And after these chain of events, everything finally collapsed. The final fall and current life. The violent altercation in the bar that night set off a destructive shockwave that completely obliterated the career Jarrod had spent 20 years building. The A&E network, which produced Storage Wars, took the domestic violence allegations very seriously. The network immediately launched an internal investigation into the incident. While Jarrod still appeared in a few episodes of season 13, as they had been filmed prior to the event, those would be his final appearances. Beginning with season 14, Jarrod Schulz was completely removed from the show he had helped make a global phenomenon. This was a devastating and decisive blow. Jarrod did not just lose a television show. He lost his entire public identity. The persona of the lovable, risk-taking young gun was shattered, replaced by the grim reality of a man accused of domestic violence. His substantial income from television vanished, and his public image was left in ruins. His Instagram account fell silent after a final post in 2021. And, for all intents and purposes, Jarrod Schulz disappeared from the public eye. Today, at the age of 48, Jarrod Schulz leads a much quieter and more private life. He is the owner and operator of Rush Bar and Grill in Lake Forest, California, a business he acquired in April 2019, before the scandal erupted. He is in a new relationship with Rachel Beckman, who works as a bartender at his establishment. His 2 children with Brandy, Cameron, and Peyton are now young adults in their early 20s. Jarrod had a successful career on Storage Wars, but on that fateful night at the Orange County bar, he revealed he hadn't actually changed as much as everyone thought. It appears the kid who went to prison for drugs and DUI was still in there, still responding to conflict with aggression. He has shown that to genuinely escape one's past, changing external circumstances is not enough. Would Jarrod have been better off if he had stayed with Brandy? And will he ever get another chance? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.